dive straight in. Hey everyone, welcome back. It's 12th of August. Good to see some familiar faces and names, and welcome back for this session here on Blackboard. This session today is on tests. So we're going to recap on some of the things we covered yesterday around configuring the assessment appropriately to meet your design requirements from a pedagogical point of view. We touched on some of these things yesterday as well in terms of academic integrity. We'll touch on those things as well. And then we'll think about how we align the test settings with course requirements. I'm going to dive straight back into Blackboard, but same sort of principles apply for this session as prior sessions. If you've got any questions as we go through, please jump on the mic or come into chat, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as we go through today's session. So let me switch now to Blackboard. All right. Okay. So yesterday, if you recall correctly, we looked at the creation of assignments in Blackboard, and assignments and tests are very similar. In some respects, they share many common settings and features. But as you know, assignments are always going to be graded by the instructor or a grader. They require human intervention. Whereas when we create tests, we can create auto-graded quizzes. We can use this for formative or summative purposes. So there are some unique design considerations when it comes to that, and we'll look at those today. What was one of the other assessment tools that we can use in Blackboard that we looked at when we were creating documents? Do you remember the way that in documents we could add another student assessment tool into those? I don't know if you remember what they were called. Just a quick quiz at the beginning of our session today.
The rubric?
Rubric is a great addition, Dominic, for assignments. In documents, what's the little tool that Blackboard can help us create a mini assessment at the end of a document? Do you remember what that was called? It's gone from you.
Yeah, I don't know what it was
Yes.
called. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
It was
a
a quick
knowledge
little
check.
quiz, quick little quiz on the readings,
Quick little
right?
quiz. Exactly. Yeah. So when we're in documents, when we're looking at a document like this, we can add in a knowledge check, which just gives students one or two questions just to kind of help them determine if they've understood the material, they've read. So that's different. That's not a graded assessment. Whereas what we're looking at today is stuff that will, generally speaking, it will have a bearing on the grade book. And on Monday's session, next Monday, we'll be looking at the grade book in more detail. All right. So let's start off by creating a test in our course. I'm going to scroll down here to Unit 1, where we were the other day. And I'm going to expand the folder where we want to place the test. And we're going to click the plus symbol in order to add our test in. We're going to click the create option at the top here. And then we're going to scroll down in the little peek pane to test underneath our assessment options. And here we have this very familiar now, this workspace to start creating our assessment in. So we'll just call this one end of module quiz, or end of unit quiz, I should say. And there's about 4 or 5 things going on here. First of all, we've got this menu across the top, which allows us to access the gradebook for this quiz, a report that documents student activity, analysis that allows us to sort of tease out some interesting details about how these questions may or may not be good differentiators of understanding and learning and all that kind of stuff, standard deviation, all that good jazz. That's the menu here that we've got inside of the test. On the right-hand side, we've got our very familiar now release conditions, our visibility setting. And then here in this section, this is the canvas where we create our assessment. And if we click the plus symbol, if you hover over the plus symbol, we have all these different question types, which we can start building our questions with. And then on the right-hand side, we have the assessment settings, which we looked at in Monday's session for assignments, and they're very, very similar. And so each time you build a test, you're going to think about, is it a formative, is it a summative quiz? How do I want to assess the students? Obviously, you wouldn't, no, not obviously, but in the case of a test, you wouldn't be using a rubric, but you might want to be using things like a due date, which we looked at on Monday. You can set a due date. You might want to be adjusting the way that the quiz is or the test is presented to improve the student experience, but also sometimes make it slightly more of a summative type test with things like prohibiting backtracking. That might be useful. And then at the bottom here, we have the ability to, remember, we covered this on Monday, have a code that students have to enter before they access the test, have a restriction, so they can only actually bring this up in Blackboard from a set of IP addresses, and then also things like time limits in order to test the student's ability to respond under a time pressure. So all of those things can be configured. We looked at all of those things on Monday. I'm not going to go back into those in much detail. But there are some unique things here that pertain particularly to tests. And we'll come back and we'll look at those in more detail once we've added some questions. Okay. So let's start off by, now we're familiar with this interface. Let's start off by adding some questions. When you are in this screen here, you can reuse questions that have already been used in this course, maybe the last time you taught it. You can reuse questions from a previous course, only in this case, I don't have any previous questions in my question bank, so it's empty. But in many cases, you will be able to reuse questions from previous iterations of this quiz or this course. You can also manually add your questions, but we also have these suggestions that utilize the same capabilities that we looked at the other day for assignments, where Blackboard will draw on the context of this quiz or this test. That context can be refined further by using this context picker. You can adjust the complexity. It's the same interface that we've been using all along. And basically what we're doing here is a loose form of prompt engineering to get the design assistant to tell us, to get it to ingest all this information and output suggestions in terms of quiz questions. Now, the one thing that's unique when you're generating question types is the question type dropdown. And this has the common question types in it. If you choose Inspire Me, then it's just going to create a menu of different question types from which you can choose the ones that you feel comfortable with. So if I just want multiple choice questions, I can change that option there, tap generate, and this time it's only going to return multiple choice questions. So we'll let it do that. And then once it's done that, we'll add some of those to our test canvas. I'm just going to pick a couple. It's given me about 4 questions here. We'll just choose 1, 3, and 4. I'm not an expert in this particular subject, so this is not a good illustration in that respect of this particular workflow, because at this point I need to be checking for accuracy. hallucinations and all the typical stuff. We're going to add these 3 questions to our assessment, and that will do us nicely. Okay. Now we've added a couple of questions into our test canvas. There are a couple of extra things going on here now from a interface perspective that we need to be mindful of. The first is that if we want to add another question in, notice these dotted lines, which we're familiar with now. We've seen these lots and times in Ultra, which allow me to add in new questions in the place where I want to add them in. That's the first thing. So if you want to add in new questions, including using the auto-generate question tool, you can do that as well. The second thing is that we have some options here that are now available to us. Hey there, little one. We have some options now for bulk editing these questions as well as printing them. So let's say, for example, I want the default point value to be 10 points. I can tap the options button, tap bulk edit, and this allows me to select all the question types I want to make adjustments to and change the point value by tapping in the point field and say 10, and then tap the update button to update the default point value for all of these questions to 10 points. So let's do that now. Okay, now they're all equal 10 points, and the maximum grading obviously is reflective of that change on the right-hand side here as well. If I want to make adjustments at the question level, I can tap into the edit option for this individual question, and I can change that. I can also duplicate and delete this individual question. And when I go into edit mode, I'll see a number of other things here, which I would have seen if I'd have authored the question myself from the get-go. The first is the question statement itself, the question text. And we're familiar now with this interface. It's this rich text editor with all the different options we've got available to us, all of which are designed for readability and accessibility and inclusion. And if I follow good practice, I could add in an image here if I wanted to, if I want the students to respond to an image. And when I do that, if I upload an image, it will allow me to add in alt text. So that image is always going to be screen reader friendly. Below that, I have options for partial and negative feedback, option feedback, so I can actually provide feedback on each individual option, or simply automated feedback when the student gets the question correct or when they get it incorrect. So for an auto-graded question, the ability for either automated feedback or option feedback allow me to use this as a formative tool. And if we combine that with multiple attempts, then the students can just keep taking the quiz until they arrive at a grade that they are satisfied with. Now you'll notice when we turn on automated feedback that Blackboard informs us that this feedback will be available after submission. We'll come back to that later because you'll be familiar with this already in Blackboard in the previous version. There is a sequence at which information about the individual options and question itself become available to students. And sometimes that sequence can be configured in a way which undermines the integrity of the test. For example, if we release the feedback to this particular question after the submission, the student may be able to take that information and share it with the students, and thereby allow them to simply select the correct answer. So that sequence of different stages within the assessment workflow is something we have complete control over, and we'll come back to that in a little while on the settings. Okay, so we've got the question text, we've got the option feedback and automated feedback. So in here we could put well done, and we could reinforce what they are learning through this question by adding an additional statement which would which would correspond with their correct answer. Or here we can put try again. But again, you typically put in more information if you wanted this to be formative to help the students understand where they got wrong, where they went wrong. Okay. Now, in and of itself, this is a question in my end of unit quiz. But because it's in Blackboard and in this course, whatever I configure here in terms of option feedback and automated feedback, all of that is stored metadata with this individual question, and I can reuse it without having to reauthor all of this. I can reuse this at any other point in my course. I could add it to an assignment as just a one-off question, or I could add it into a separate quiz. It lives in this course, and therefore all of this extra metadata that I'm adding in here will go with it as a question. So the work that you put in to design this question, and particularly if it's if you're going to use it in a formative context, add in this kind of extra metadata, it's well worth doing it because you'll only have to ever do it once, and then once it's done, it's done. Okay. In the actual test options itself, when we have Blackboard generate these questions for us, they are always going to come back with 4 options by default, but you can add options. And I don't believe there's a limit to how many options you can add functionally. The question is more about good questions. The practice there is going to be more about what is a good question design. And, you obviously don't want too many options, otherwise it starts to undermine probably the efficacy of the question at some point. So if you want to remove an option, you tap the trash icon. And if you want to move an option, if the sequence of order here is important to you, use these double-headed arrows, a little bit like we did in the grade book, to drag and then move that item around in the list. If it's a multiple choice, multiple answer question, then this particular question type can have up to 4 options, because there are 4 options available. It could have all of the above essentially selected as options. So although it may seem when you let's just save this for a moment. And let's just click the plus symbol. Although it may seem that you don't have as many question types here, for example, you don't have the either or question type. The either or question type can be accommodated with the true false question type or the multiple choice question type with a multiple selection with the multiple choice single answer. So bear that in mind. Although you might not see all the question types that you're used to in the previous version of Blackboard, there are equivalents, and there are certainly pedagogical equivalents. And what you want to think about is, what's the outcome pedagogically that I want to achieve? How can I achieve that with one of the question types that's available to me here? And in most cases, I would say 90% of cases, you'll be able to achieve the same pedagogical outcome, even if you might need to adapt the question slightly in order to achieve that. So let's go back to our edit mode for a moment. Yes, so students can select up to, in this case, it's just one option. One answer is correct, and they'll only get the 10 points if they choose that option. Okay. You'll notice that option feedback is grayed out if we're using just the overall automated feedback. Those two things are mutually exclusive. So if you want to provide option feedback, you use option feedback. You can't do both. And there would be questions over even whether that would be useful, because at some point the formative benefit of both feedback mechanisms could either somewhat be contradictory, or they could just be redundant. There would be a degree of redundancy in what you're presenting in the option feedback and the overall automated feedback. So you're going to go for one or the other, depending on what your design choices are. The only other thing to cover here is question metadata. Now, I've been saying that all of the other things we've been configuring here are sort of metadata, and they are, but there are some back office, if you like, metadata fields here that we can utilize to help us build questions that we can easily find based on categorization tags. Okay. So maybe this is a question as it is about what constitutes a strong thesis statement in an essay. That's great, but which kind of categories in my course does that live in from an assessment perspective? And so you can enter these tags. You simply tap in the box here, and you put essay theory or whatever you want to put in there, and then you tap on create essay theory, and that creates this little chip or a pill with that tag, and all the questions that pertain to essay theory can be tagged in that way, so that even if the word essay theory isn't used in the question itself, you'll be able to find that as part of an exercise to create a discrete quiz particularly about that subject. And you can have multiple tags. So again, this is perhaps a lot of extra work the first time you author the question, but super helpful in the future if you want to create a quiz that's all about one or more of these specific question tags. So really useful. And when we look at the question bank tool later, you'll see how that comes into play. Tap save on that. So you could do this for each question inside of your test canvas here. You're going to edit the question in order to bring up those unique options, and so on and so forth. This button here is basically an accordion. It collapses and expands your automated feedback, so you can see that at a glance without having to go into the edit option here. Okay. Any questions so far about the authoring process before we move on to settings?
Can you enable automated feedback for all questions in one shot?
I don't believe you can. No. So you can duplicate a question so that the next question has similar metadata, including the automated feedback. But you can't do a bulk automated feedback process, unfortunately. So it would be either writing that, if it's generic enough to survive that kind of generic process, I'd be inclined to do a duplicate. But obviously that depends whether you're authoring the questions manually or whether you're actually having Blackboard suggest questions for you.
If I created a question bank, can I adjust some properties of those questions in bulk across the whole bank? Like maybe automated feedback for all questions in the bank.
Yeah, no, I don't think you can do that in a question bank. The question bank tool allows you to edit the individual questions, but not, again, it's very similar to this in that respect. It's not going to allow you to, so we have a question now, so I can show you that. We go into the question bank. We click the plus symbol and we tap new. So Lloyd's question bank. And then we tap the plus symbol and we say reuse questions. And we can pull in we can pull our questions in. So you'll notice once we're into this question bank, we can do some filtering based on the tags that we just mentioned. We can do some filtering based on different question types. We can add in new questions, but there is no ability to do a bulk edit across all of the different questions on any given dimension of the metadata, including automated feedback. Yes, you can, Alison, you can import questions from an older Blackboard course. That those will, that any question types that are supported. So if you take a multiple question type from an old Blackboard course and you bring it into your new Blackboard course, those will come across. So it's always just good to just double check that everything's come across okay. But those will come across. They will be translated effectively. But to Alex's point, there is no tool presently in Blackboard where you can do bulk edit on automated feedback.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. It's a great question, and I guess there will be there's definitely some mileage in that. What I've illustrated, I suppose, reinforces what I did was I put in well done and try again. And for those kinds of automated feedback, you could see why that might be useful to have that generically applied to all the questions. In reality, if it's a formative quiz, there's probably a lot more I could do there to improve the efficacy of that feedback as a formative tool for students. So I guess in some respects, just because you can doesn't mean you should, but you can't. So for now, it's a one-by-one exercise. Okay. Thank you, Alex, for the question. It's a good question, and Alison, hopefully, you can definitely experiment with that. We might have touched this in a previous workshop, but when you're trying to bring content in, like an old question, for example, from a different course, you're going to use the copy function. You're going to tap out here, outside of the course, because we need to get the object from one course to another. So it's not at this stage, it's not a test action. It's a course action. So to get that old Blackboard test into this Blackboard environment, the first thing that we do is we're going to come over here. We're going to, typically the way you do it is like this. You copy items. You'd find the course where the item is. You'd click this icon here to go a little bit deeper, to drill down. We're going to go again down into content. We're going to go into this one here. And here's a test that I created in my music composition course. So I'm going to tap that item here. You can copy multiple items if you want to. So we could go back up this breadcrumb. And we could go into this one. It has no items. Let's choose. Yeah, that's a assignment, I think. That's an assignment. So I'll leave that off for now, but you can copy multiple items. And then you start the copy, and Blackboard then runs that in a background process. And you can carry on. You can do whatever you like. Whatever you do doesn't disrupt the copying process. And now that's been copied into your course. Now, I did it from up here. You can do it from inside a learning module. So let's suppose you want to copy an item and you want to copy in right here. You click the plus symbol and you choose copy content, and then it will be entered in right here. So that's actually a better workflow than the one I've just shown you. It's the same process, copy content. You get the same interface where you can choose the content you want to copy and copy it across. The upside is that it will actually get put in at the place at which you specified. Whereas now, the item that I've just added is brought in at the bottom of this course. So I'm going to do my little trick where I use the cursor keys on my keyboard to move this up into Unit 1. And there we go. Let's just move it up to there. Okay, so that's been brought into the course. And now, if I was to go back to my question bank, I'm conscious we didn't go slowly through the question bank, so I can go back over this if we need to. But if I go into question banks and open the one I just created, now I have I thought it would show me the quizzes on the left-hand side. Now I can reuse questions from that question, back questions. Here it is. Why isn't that showing on there? Let me just come out of here a second and just do a refresh. Just going to refresh my page. See if the question banks. And then reuse questions. I expected to see that in there. I wonder why that isn't coming through. Bear with me a second. So this is useful for you to see. It's always useful when the Blackboard consultant has a bit of a conundrum to solve. Oh, I brought through an assignment. Okay, my bad. So that's why I brought through an assignment, not a quiz. Let me try that again. Let's try and copy, and I'll answer your question, Alison, about copying import in just a second. Just try and find an actual quiz. Yeah, that was the one which just been thought through. So let me bring this one through instead. Like that. Okay. Now it does a refresh automatically for us. No, is it brought it in the bottom? Ah, where's that gone to then? Music. Harmony, there it is. Unit 1. Okay. I think I'm going to do a refresh again. Yeah. So it added it in, but it didn't refresh properly. I think that's probably a bug, actually. I think it's supposed to automatically show. So if after copying something into an any module, you don't see it, just refresh the page. Now, when I go into that, we should see this time. No, it's another assignment. Bear with me. Bear with me. I need to find a actual quiz. Trust me, if we can find a quiz. There's a question bank there actually that I could use. There we are. That's definitely a quiz. Not that copy. It's always good to see the consultant struggling because this is the kind of thing that will happen in real life. And I'm going to refresh again because I don't think it has refreshed the page automatically for me. Unit 1, learning activities, phase 1 quiz. Yay! So there are the questions from the other Blackboard course. Okay, sorry about that, but it's all good. It's all useful to see. This is a real live Blackboard environment. So the difference between a copy and import, an import is going to be importing an entire course package. Okay, when you go to copy items, you're able to pick particular items and just copy those, or you can copy the whole course if you want to. If you want to do a complete copy, you can do that. Whereas import is importing a package. So this allows me to go out to a zip file that another colleague from another institution has provided. It's less copying something that's already in our Blackboard system. It's more importing something that's been exported from a different environment. Okay. All right. Let's go back to our, so just to close that, can you import an entire test? From a different environment, yes, you could do, but you don't need to do an import. You shouldn't need to do an import at Coldwell, because the old version of Blackboard and the new version of Blackboard, they talk to each other. So when you choose copy items, you should be able to see all of your original courses, and you can just copy them across. You don't need to import. You don't need to export. Yeah, so you don't need to export from your old course and import into your new course. At least you shouldn't have to. The copy process will do this came from original, I'm bringing it into a new Ultra course. It will do all that for you. Yeah. And that's kind of what we did here with this phase 1 quiz here, was we imported the entire quiz, the entire test. I'm just going to do some cleanup here. Need that one. We don't need this one. Okay. So just to close the loop on that question bank workflow, let's go into question banks. Here's my question bank. Let's open it. Here's all the questions in my question bank. I'm going to say reuse questions. And now on the left-hand side here, you've got the phase 1 quiz that we've just imported from our old Blackboard course. And we can choose the questions that we want to add into our new question bank. So I'll just copy those across. There they are, ready to go. Okay. All right, so we built our test, but we want to deploy it now, and we want to think through what the different options are that Blackboard gives us to manage that deployment in the best way possible. So the first thing I want to think about deployment is about the test settings itself. On the right-hand side here, let's go into settings and take a look at some of the unique test-based configurations, the test-based settings for the new test that I've created. So let's scroll down and think about presentation options. Now, in an assignment, you don't have presentation options. You don't have multiple assignments within one assignment. It's just one assignment. But within a quiz or a test, you may have lots and lots of questions, and you might want to paginate them. You might want to segment the quiz in such a way as to improve the overall student experience. And so, depending on what your outcomes are from a pedagogical perspective, will depend on how you configure these options here. So, if you want to display one question at a time, you have that option here, and you can prohibit backtracking if you do that. If you turn off one question at a time, then there is no concept of backtracking in this particular quiz. So that is grayed out helpfully for you, signaling that it's stopping you from doing something that will be incongruous and functionally impossible. You have the option here to randomize questions within this quiz, and when you do that, it's going to randomize the sequence of questions so that Alex would get question 1 and question 2 in that order. Anisha would get question 2 and question 1. They get a different order. You can also randomize the answers, so that your A and B and C and D would be different to my A, B, and C and D. And so these are some basic level tools that we have for making this slightly more heading this test in the direction of something that's slightly more representative of the actual student's understanding versus the understanding of the cohort. for example. If you're using pages, if I just save the options here and come back to the test canvas and come to the top here, you can add page breaks in here so that you can segment the quiz up into different parts of the quiz. You might be testing different types of knowledge or different parts of the curriculum from this unit. So you can add page breaks, and if you do that, you have the ability in the presentation options to randomize the pages, as well as randomize questions and answers. Okay. If it's a formative assessment, you can tap this button here to indicate that. We looked at that when we looked at assignments the other day. It doesn't have any impact on grade calculations. It's just a way of signaling to your colleagues as instructors, and if this is ticked, to students. This is a formative exercise, and it may reduce anxiety. It may help them to engage with this as a learning exercise rather than just a kind of a more summative kind of exercise. So it's worth signaling that if in fact it is a formative assessment. You have your normal options here for grading submissions, attempts allowed, and all that kind of stuff. So typically, if it's a formative quiz, you might allow multiple attempts, and then when you do that, you have your options for which attempt you're going to take into the grade book when they complete the quiz. The next options that we haven't yet looked at in terms of settings that are unique to tests are the assessment results. And there are 4 main milestones in the journey of this assessment that you'll be familiar with from your prior Blackboard experience. The view of the submission, so the ability for the students to look back at what they submitted, the view of the feedback based on the questions, the view of the scores that they got on that question, and the view of the correct answers. And you have the ability in each case to click on the option and decide what the timing is on all of these different settings. Okay, so you might say after all grades are posted. We don't want any sharing of potentially information that could be triangulated in order to cheat on this test. So we're going to say after all grades are posted. But you've got other options in here depending on what you're trying to achieve from a pedagogical perspective. Alison says, has Blackboard yet figured out a way to under-randomize questions after the test is submitted, making class review easier as a source of frustration? That's a good question, Alison. And I feel like we have done something in the inline grading experience, but I don't know off the top of my head either what we have done or when it was released. So unless Tara knows, let me come back to you on that. I feel like we are certainly planning something if we haven't done it yet, because I've heard a lot of feedback about that, and the way you phrase the question suggests that you've already fed that back to Blackboard. So let me come back to you on that. I can't remember whether it's been addressed yet in the new inline grading experience. We've done a lot of improvements in the inline grading experience to make that kind of workflow easier. I just can't quite remember whether we've done it. So I will come back to you on that. Let me just copy that into my notes file so that I don't forget what you've asked there. Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like there is something in there, but I just can't quite remember what it is. All right, so yeah, so depending on what this test is designed to do within your course, you're going to set up the sequence of the timing of these different milestones in the assessment workflow. You're going to set that up accordingly. And obviously there is some logic built in here, again, to stop you from doing something silly. So if you say after submission, they can view their submission after the submission. But if you then change this to after all grades are posted, all of the options, they get into line, they align themselves with any prior options that you've chosen from a sequencing perspective. so that you can't do something that is impossible. And if you try to choose a prior option in this drop down, it's grayed out. You simply can't choose it. So there's nothing, you can't go wrong here. You can't go wrong here from a functional perspective, but obviously you could go wrong from a design perspective because you've got the freedom to choose here what the sequence is. Okay. The show correct answers is by default turned off. But if it's really formative and you really want to give that information, then absolutely you can turn that on as well. Okay. So those are unique settings to do with the assessment workflow as it pertains to tests in Blackboard. And yeah, that's all we need to cover in relation to assessment settings. Let's just add a timer because I'd like to show you the student experience where this is pertained, where this is concerned. 5-minute timer. Yeah, we'll add an access code as well, just so that you can see that. I want you to see what the student sees, because obviously developing their literacy is somewhat predicated on you understanding how you can shepherd them through this process and build their literacy. So, you know, and again, I don't need to tell you this, you know this, building little fun quizzes with these kinds of features turned on will help them to become literate with and become fluent in the way that the tool works in Blackboard in this new version. They might be familiar with the old version, but they might not be familiar with the new version. So creating some fun quizzes with these settings turned on before they go for the actual, summative quiz will help them to feel that they're not encumbered by, how does this work? They just focus on answering the questions in the quiz. So let's save that. I have no idea about this subject, so I'm going to probably bomb this quiz, but hey, it doesn't matter. The final thing we need to do before we turn into student preview is deploy this quiz. And we talked about this in the assignment workflow, that you've got two basic options here to make it visible or hidden, but you've also got the release conditions. And so if this quiz is really aimed at just a small subsection of the cohort, you can use the you can use the specific members or groups option to segment the cohort. If this quiz is only supposed to be released after a certain date or time, you can choose that rule. If it's supposed to be only released after a student has completed a prior activity, you can choose that option as well. So in deploying this quiz, you're going to want to think through, what is this designed to do? Should it be treated in a deployment sense in a way that uses release conditions to deploy it effectively? We'll just leave it as simply visible. So let's go out of the test canvas now and go into student preview. Yeah. Okay, so scroll down to Unit 1. Open the Learning Activities folder and jump into the end of unit quiz. Now, before I enter the quiz, it already tells me that there's a due date, and it tells me that there's an 8-minute time restriction on this quiz. Tells me that it's formative, so that's great. I'm not going to worry too much about this. I've got 3 attempts anyway. And then on the right-hand side here, asks for the access code, which I can paste in. I copied it to my clipboard. I can paste in over here before I click the Start Attempt button. So let's start the attempt. When I start an attempt of a quiz that's got a timer, in case I missed the mention of a timer in the previous screen, it's going to tell me here how the timer works and what to expect. I click Start Timer, and the timer appears at the top of the quiz canvas here, test canvas, with a record of how many minutes are remaining. When it gets to 1 minute, it will show in seconds. It will show the remaining seconds left. If for reasons of kind of distraction, this is viewed by the student as distracting. They can click the eyeball icon just to hide that, and use some other method for timing, or just periodically come back and toggle it. So if that is becoming a distraction, they can actually they can make it invisible. Okay. Now, as I scroll down the canvas, I can start to answer these questions. Now, as I do that, this progress bar across the top here tells me, in sort of proportion to the rest of the questions in this quiz, how far I've gone, and it tells me as well how many questions are remaining. And it keeps scrolling down. As I scroll down, notice that information, it's sticky. It stays on the screen. So I'm focused on the quiz, not on this metadata that's helping me to sort of manage my time effectively. If you're doing a paginated quiz, you can flag questions, which you'll be familiar with. And then that is also summarized in this area for you to know, I've got 3 questions I haven't answered yet. 1 is on page 1, 2 is, and so on and so forth. So if you're using if you're working with a paginated quiz, you'll be able to flag questions. Let's answer the remaining questions, and you can see the interface updating. And each time I answer a question, it's going to save the student's progress, just like it did in the old version of Blackboard. So if they lose internet connection, or the power goes off or something, it does know that they answered the first 2 questions. Let's just see if I can answer these questions. Which statement best describes the strong freedoms? Yeah, that sounds all right. Anyone want to have a guess at this? It's probably that one. I have no idea what this is.
I think
No idea.
this will be B.
B? Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering. It did look plausible. Thank you, Alex. All right, good. So I can save and close this, and you can close the draft, but the timer is active. It's still running. The timer hasn't stopped. Here's an example of what happens if you try to re-enter the quiz without the access code. It tells you that. And so if I jump back into this attempt, we've now only got 5 minutes remaining, but we've completed the quiz anyway. So that was really just for illustration purposes. Here's the question filtering, including unanswered questions and flag questions as well. So now we'll click submit. And just like we saw yesterday with the assignment workflow, when we click submit, Blackboard will return us a confirmation number that is proof that is now living and breathing in the gradebook. Once that's completed, because this is auto graded, we can see the submission. We said that was permitted in the sequence. We can see the grade. It's already been given us. And if we go into the submission, we'll see the feedback. Oh, look, we did really well. We got 30 out of 30. Thank you, Alex, for your help on that. So yeah, we're seeing the feedback that we entered into that first question. Not seeing any other feedback because we didn't put that into the metadata. Okay. Now I'm sure there are some edge cases in terms of extra credit and things like that. You can explore those at your own leisure. But that's the sort of end-to-end workflow of working with tests in Blackboard. When we look at the gradebook on Monday, we'll be covering off the sort of the back end of the workflow, because that's ultimately where all the data from assessments, discussion boards, graded discussion boards, and tests lives, as you know. So that will be the focus of Monday's session. But hopefully that was helpful just to show you sort of the end-to-end process of creating quick quizzes and tests in Blackboard. And what I would suggest is that you let's come out of student preview. Okay, Jermaine, no worries. Thank you for that. What I would suggest, obviously, is that you dive into your Blackboard canvas and your Blackboard sandbox, have a play, experiment with your different quiz question options, copy those questions over from your previous Blackboard courses, do some validation, some quality assurance on those once they've come across to make sure that everything is looking good. And if you have any issues, then you can let us know. But yeah, they should come across.
Can we quickly look at question analysis for the test that you completed?
Sure. Yeah. We don't have enough sample data, I don't think, to make much sense of it, but I'll show you anyway. That one, I think. Okay, so the reality is that this is, it's like any report. You're not really going to trust it at this stage because we don't have enough data in here to sort of do the math on it. But once you've got a cohort size of like, 15 to 30, then you start to get enough data. I would say the bigger the bigger the cohort size, the better the data, obviously, that. But this is going to give you the discrimination and difficulty scores for this question. And the more data you have, the more reliable those designations are going to be. Down the bottom here, any questions that, again, you need a bigger sample size to look at this. Any questions that are problem questions, maybe the question stem was wrong or the correct answer was wrong, you're going to see evidence of that in this space at the bottom here. You're going to see, yeah, this question clearly is a really bad question. Every student that's performing well on this course is getting it wrong. So there's something wrong with the way the question stem is authored, most likely. I mean, not necessarily, but most likely. And so when you see that data in this analysis page, you've got a button here to edit the assessment. It's going to take you straight back into edit mode, and you can change, essentially regrade at this stage. You can change the correct answer. Maybe it should have been C, and then it would do the regrading for you as part of that revision process. Let's just cancel out of that. So yeah, I don't have enough data in this particular quiz here. I wonder if I have an example that I could show you. Fundamentals of artificial intelligence. Let me just see if there's one in here that I could show you. Okay, so a little bit more data is still not really, I still wouldn't trust this because I don't think there's enough students on it, but it's giving you a slightly better feel for the way this works. And all three questions in this case, it believes need a review because the metadata, the data, the student data is suggestive of a problem. I mean, it's saying needs review. It might be that the cohort, just bombed on this question, but once the sample size gets to a certain point, you can start to rely on this data fairly heavily. But I mean, how many students? Yeah, it's completed attempts is 2, so it's not really reliable at this stage. So use this with the normal academic cautions that you'd apply and what have you. But it becomes more useful as you get more and more data. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Alex. Yeah. yes, you can rerun that report. And it's quite cool to do it at the end of a course and compare it with previous cohorts and do some analysis based off of the comparison. Yes, Dominic.
Uh, may I ask a fairly unrelated question?
Sure.
Before when you go into course copy, um,
Mm,
every single course I've ever taught, whether it's online or I only teach one online class, one of my courses, and every single one is there, and it's just a jumble of courses. And
mm,
unfortunately, in the past, I've always copied the wrong course from the wrong because it's very difficult to find the exact course you want. Is there any
mm.
plans, or are there any plans to change that menu? If they changed it to like our main menu by semester, that would be very
Mm.
helpful. This way we go to the semester, go to the class, and then the mistake of copying the wrong course would be nullified. Well, you know, be very
Diminished.
helpful in that regard. Is that
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
you've heard of that's a problem in the past, or any plans?
Yeah, it's normally um, dodged or gotten or circumnavigated by adopting um, a convention for course IDs that would present to you information that would make that page more useful. Um, so it's more of a administrative thing, I think. The other piece of this is, do you use terms? That might be a question for Tara. Do you use terms at Coldwell? Yeah,
Mhm.
you do. Okay.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, it would be cool if you could search this by terms
Yeah.
and
Right.
then narrow down. Yeah, okay. That's
Well,
cool. I hadn't
I'm sorry, that's an
go on.
institutional issue then.
Yeah, so you can see in my list here that I've got designations that tell me what version this was, what month it was, what year it was. Um, you could definitely adopt a course ID convention where you uh, ingested from your student record system that kind of metadata that would make it easier for you without us enhancing the product, obviously, which is a great idea to have it be able, you could filter by terms. That would make it easier for you to find that needle in the haystack. Yeah.
Thanks.
There is also one more thing that you can do on your course panel. You can hide certain courses from your view. Then when
Mm.
you do copy, much less of the courses will appear. So I usually hide, like a couple semesters ago, I hide those courses, and then it's much easier selection when you do copy.
I didn't know that hiding the courses translated over to that other menu. Huh, that's interesting. Thanks.
It does. It
Huh,
does.
didn't know that.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't know that either. So that's interesting. I didn't know that as a closed course. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, thanks.
You
yeah,
can select click on the three dots and select hide from me or
yeah,
hide from me, and
yeah.
then it will disappear from the lists.
Yeah, yeah. Huh, crazy. Thanks.
Cool. Good to know. Yeah, Alex, you can do the next session on Monday for Gradebook. That's really cool. Good to share little tips and tricks.
That's coming from my computer science background. I investigate products.
Yeah, love it. Great. Good questions. You're welcome, Stephanie. You're welcome. Any more questions? Anything else you want to look at? Got a few minutes left. All right. I think we're done.